This story is titled, Mother-in-Law Broke Into My House and Shaved My Hair. Husband defended her, so I walked out. Now they're begging for my help. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I never thought I'd be the type to air my personal drama online, but this situation is so beyond insane that I can't keep it to myself. My husband, Mark, 33 male, and I, 30 female, have been married for 4 years. And while his mom, Linda, 55 female, has always been a bit extra, I never imagined she'd take her antics to this level. From day one, Linda had her opinions about me, my job, my clothes, even the way I distract her precious son. But last week she took it way too far, and I'm still reeling. Last night I woke up to a nightmare, and I'm not even exaggerating. You know when you have one of those mornings where something just feels off but you can't put your finger on it right away? That was me. My head felt lighter, almost like something was missing. Half asleep, I stumbled into the bathroom and turned on the light. And then I saw it. My reflection staring back at me, except it wasn't me. One side of my hair was hacked into a jagged mess, like someone had gone at it with garden shears, while the other side still hung awkwardly past my shoulder. I froze, completely stunned. My brain couldn't even process it at first. Did I do this to myself? Did I sleepwalk and somehow find scissors in the middle of the night? I stood there, poking at my uneven hair in disbelief. It looked so bad it was almost funny, except it wasn't. After about 10 minutes of staring at myself like an idiot, I started piecing things together. There was no way I did this. I've never sleepwalked a day in my life, and I definitely wouldn't attack my own hair in my sleep. So who the hell did this? The only other person in the house was my husband, Mark. I found him in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone like it was any normal day. I walked in, trying to stay calm, and said, "Hey, do you know what happened to my hair?" Mark looked up, and the second he saw me, his face went pale. He stammered, what are you talking about?" I pointed to my head, still half expecting him to tell me it was some weird prank, or that I was imagining things, but no. He just stared at me like I had 3 heads, and then he said the weirdest thing. "I think my mom might have done it." I swear, I thought I misheard him. "What are you talking about? Your mom? Linda? She doesn't even have a key to our house." Mark avoided eye contact, which is always a dead giveaway that he's hiding something. He started mumbling about how Linda had been acting worried lately, and might have come over last night. At that point, I was fully awake and ready to lose it. "Are you telling me your mom snuck into our house in the middle of the night and cut my hair?" Mark shrugged like it wasn't a big deal and said, "I don't know. Maybe? Maybe?" I didn't even know how to respond to that. What kind of person breaks into someone's house with scissors and gives them a surprise haircut while they're sleeping? Linda isn't just nosy or overbearing. This was next level insane. Mark finally admitted that Linda had been making some weird comments lately about me and this coworker of mine, Matt, 25 male. Apparently, she decided that I was cheating on Mark, and in her delusional little mind, cutting my hair was some kind of punishment. At this point, I was shaking with anger. I grabbed my phone and called Linda right away. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. "Linda, did you cut my hair last night?" She paused for a second, probably trying to figure out how to lie her way out of it. But then she said, "Well, maybe now you'll think twice before embarrassing my son." Embarrassing him? Lady, I'm the one walking around looking like a rejected emo teenager. After confronting Linda and hearing her ridiculous excuse, I was more confused and furious than ever. It wasn't just that she'd cut my hair, though that alone was horrific. It was her total lack of remorse. She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she had the audacity to act like she was doing everyone a favor. When I told her that Matt and I were just co-workers and that the lunch was nothing but work-related, she immediately dismissed me. "You expect me to believe that?" She scoffed, as if she'd caught me in some elaborate lie. "I wasn't born yesterday, sweetheart. Women like you always think you can fool everyone, but I see right through you." "Women like me?" I repeated, stunned. What does that even mean? Linda didn't answer directly. Instead, she went on this weird rant about how modern women have no respect for marriage, and how men are always the last to know. It was clear she had made up this entire story in her head, and no amount of logic or evidence was going to change her mind. I tried to explain myself calmly at first, even though I was shaking with rage. "Linda, you're completely wrong. Matt is just a coworker. We were discussing a project at work. Mark knows I have to meet with coworkers sometimes. It's part of my job." "That's what they all say. I know the signs, and you've been giving off plenty of them, she said. At that point, I lost it. The signs? Linda, you don't even live with us. You see me once a week, if that. What signs are you talking about? She had no real answer, of course. She just kept spewing nonsense about how she was protecting her son and how I should be grateful she didn't do something worse. Grateful? Grateful for what? For violating my privacy? For sneaking into my house like a criminal? For humiliating me? It was so absurd that I almost laughed. Almost. When I hung up the phone, I felt like I just argued with a brick wall. I turned to Mark, hoping for some kind of support, but he looked like he wanted to disappear. Well, I said, crossing my arms, what are you going to do about this? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. She's my mom. She's just worried about me. Worried about you? I shot back. She's delusional, Mark. She broke into our house and cut my hair because she thinks I'm cheating on you. How is that okay in any universe? Mark didn't answer right away. Instead, he started pacing around the kitchen, mumbling excuses for Linda. She's old-fashioned. She's protective. She's always been like this. I don't care what she's like, I snapped. What she did was crazy, and illegal, and humiliating. You need to stand up to her and tell her this is unacceptable. Mark nodded vaguely, but I could tell he wasn't really listening. He's always had a hard time standing up to Linda, and I knew this situation was no different. It's like she has some kind of power over him, a way of making him feel like a little kid again, even though he's a grown man. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. Linda's words kept echoing. Women like you always think they can fool everyone. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I'd been nothing but faithful to Mark since the day we met. I've always taken my marriage seriously, even when Linda tried to insert herself into every little decision we made. And now she was trying to tear us apart with some made-up story about me cheating. I felt so violated, not just by Linda, but by Mark, too. His refusal to stand up for me felt like a betrayal in itself. I couldn't understand how he could just shrug this off like it was no big deal. I went to bed that night with a knot in my stomach, knowing that this wasn't over. Linda might have been the one holding the scissors, but Mark's lack of support cut just as deep. The next morning, I decided to lay down some ground rule. I sat Mark down at the kitchen table and said, "We need to talk about your mom. What she did was completely out of line, and I'm not going to let her get away with it." Mark looked uncomfortable, but he nodded. "Okay, what do you want to do?" "For starters, I want her out of our lives," I said firmly. "She can't come over here anymore. Not until she apologizes and gets help." "Help?" Mark asked, frowning. "Yes, help," I said. "She broke into our house and cut my hair, Mark. That's not normal. She needs therapy or something." Mark shifted in his seat, looking torn. "I don't know. She's my mom. I can't just cut her out like that." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my anger in check. "I'm not asking you to cut her out forever, but she needs consequences. If we just let this slide, she'll think it's okay to keep crossing boundaries." Mark didn't argue, but he didn't exactly agree either. He just mumbled something about needing time to think. Meanwhile, Linda kept calling and texting me, acting like she was the victim in all this. She accused me of being selfish for not forgiving her. One text even said, "If you really loved Mark, you'd understand why I did what I did." I couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. She genuinely thought she was in the right, that her actions were justified because she was protecting her son. It was like she was living in some alternate reality, where she got to decide who I was and what my intentions were. By the end of the week, I was at my breaking point. Between Mark's indecisiveness and Linda's nonstop harassment, I felt like I was going crazy. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and every time I looked in the mirror, I was reminded of what she'd done to me. Something had to give. I told Mark that if he couldn't stand up to his mom, I would. "She's not welcome in this house," I said firmly, "and if you can't tell her that, I will." Mark looked panicked, like I just asked him to climb Mount Everest. "Can we at least wait a few days?" he pleaded. "No," I said. "This has gone on long enough. Either you talk to her, or I do." He finally agreed to confront Linda with me, but I could tell he wasn't happy about it. Part of me wondered if he was really on my side, or if he was just trying to keep the peace. Either way, I knew this wasn't over. Linda wasn't just a meddling mother-in-law. She was a full-blown menace. And if Mark couldn't see that, I didn't know how much longer I could stay in this marriage. By the time Mark and I sat down to confront Linda together, I was already on edge. I'd been dealing with her constant calls and texts for days, each one more manipulative than the last. She didn't apologize, or even acknowledge that what she did was wrong. Instead, she doubled down, acting like I was the bad guy for being upset. And Mark? He was dragging his feet the entire time, trying to avoid the confrontation altogether. When we finally got to Linda's house, she greeted us with this smug, self-satisfied look on her face. "Well, it's about time," she said, standing in the doorway like she was the queen of the world. Mark hesitated, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. I nudged him forward, whispering, "You need to say something." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mom, we need to talk about what happened." Linda's expression didn't change. She crossed her arms and said, "What is there to talk about?" I did what needed to be done. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Needed to be done?" I said, stepping forward. "You broke into our house and cut my hair while I was asleep. Do you even understand how insane that sounds?" Linda rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. It's just hair. It'll grow back." "That was it," I snapped. "It's not just about the hair, Linda. It's about the fact that you invaded my personal space, disrespected me, and violated my trust. And for what? Because you think I'm cheating on Mark? Based on absolutely nothing?" She didn't even flinch. "I saw you with that man," she said, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "I know what I saw." I turned to Mark, waiting for him to back me up. This was his chance to finally stand up for me, to show that he believed me and not his mother. But instead, he just stood there, staring at the floor like a scolded child. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling, "are you seriously going to let her talk to me like this? Say something." He finally looked up, and what he said next completely shattered me. "I don't know, okay? I don't know what to believe anymore." It felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. "You don't know what to believe?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Mom's been saying things, and I've been noticing stuff too. Like how you've been on your phone more lately, and you've been working late a lot. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think I'm cheating on you?" "I don't know," he snapped, throwing his hands in the air. But I couldn't ignore it either. And when Mom said she was going to do what she did, I didn't stop her because I thought maybe it would, I don't know, bring out the truth. At that moment, it felt like my entire world had come crashing down. Not only had Linda violated me in the most personal way possible, but now I was finding out that Mark, my husband, the person who was supposed to love and trust me, had been in on it. He let this happen because he believed his mom's paranoid delusions over me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep myself from completely losing it. "So, let me get this straight," I said, my voice shaking. "You thought I was cheating on you, and instead of talking to me like an adult, you let your mom sneak into our house and assault me in my sleep? That's how little you trust me?" Mark looked at me, guilt written all over his face, but he didn't say anything. That silence told me everything I needed to know. Meanwhile, Linda was sitting there with a satisfied smirk, like she'd just won some twisted game. "See?" she said, addressing Mark. "I told you she wasn't innocent. Look at how defensive she's being." I turned to her, shaking with anger. "I'm defensive because you're accusing me of something I didn't do. I've never cheated on Mark, and I never would. Matt is just a co-worker, but even if he wasn't, that still wouldn't justify what you did. You're not the morality police, Linda. You're a bully." Her face darkened, and for a moment, she looked like she was going to argue. But then she just shrugged and said, "Believe what you want. I did what I had to do for my son. I couldn't stay in that house a second longer." I turned to Mark and said, "I'm done. If you can't see how insane this is, then I can't be with you." "What are you saying?" he asked, panic flashing in his eyes. "I'm saying I'm leaving," I said firmly. "You and your mom can have each other. I'm done trying to prove myself to either of you." I went home, packed a bag, and left to stay with my friend Chloe, 30 female. The whole drive there, I kept replaying everything in my head. The way Linda had smirked, the way Mark had hesitated, the way they had both made me feel like a liar and a villain. When I got to Chloe's, I broke down completely. She hugged me while I sobbed, telling her the whole story between gasps for air. "How could he believe her over me?" I asked, my voice raw. "I've done nothing but love him, and this is how he repays me?" Chloe shook her head, looking just as furious as I felt. "This isn't about you, hun. It's about them. Linda's crazy, and Mark's too weak to stand up to her. You deserve better than this." Hearing her say that stung, but it also felt like the truth. Mark had always struggled to set boundaries with Linda. She'd meddled in everything from our wedding planning to how we decorated our home. She had opinions on everything, how I dressed, how I cooked, even how I talked to Mark. I'd chalked it up to overprotectiveness, but now I realized it was so much more than that. She was right, of course, but that didn't make it hurt any less. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and completely alone. The person I thought I could trust more than anyone else in the world had let me down in the worst possible way. Over the next few days, I barely slept or ate. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, about how easily Mark had thrown our relationship under the bus because of his mom's manipulative lies. It wasn't just the haircut. It was the lack of trust, the lack of respect, the lack of everything that makes a marriage work. And the worst part? Mark wasn't even trying to fix it. Sure, he sent a few texts apologizing and saying he wanted to talk, but it all felt hollow. If he really wanted to make things right, he wouldn't be hiding behind his phone. He'd be here, fighting for me. But he wasn't. And that told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of missed calls and texts from Mark. At first, I thought maybe he'd finally grown a spine and was ready to take responsibility. But no. The texts were the same as always. Can we please talk? I know you're mad, but we can work this out. I'm really sorry. I just didn't know what to do. What was there to talk about? What was left to work out? He'd shown me who he was. Someone who would always put his mother's feelings above mine, no matter how much it hurt me. Then, there were Linda's messages. I hadn't blocked her yet, though I probably should have. She'd been sending these long, ranting voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart, and how I needed to come home and be a good wife. She even said, "Mark is miserable without you. If you really cared about him, you'd stop being so selfish and forgive us." Selfish? Linda really thought I was the selfish one in all of this? I played one of her voicemails for Chloe, who immediately snatched my phone out of my hand and deleted it. "Why are you even listening to her?" she asked, her voice sharp. "She's crazy, and you don't owe her anything." She was right, of course, but it was hard to ignore the guilt gnawing at me. I wasn't the one who'd done anything wrong, but Linda had a way of twisting things, making me feel like I was the problem. Over the next few days, I started thinking more seriously about what I wanted. Did I really want to stay in a marriage where my husband didn't trust me? Where his mother had so much control over his thoughts and actions? The answer was becoming painfully clear. But leaving wasn't as simple as just walking away. Mark and I had a life together, a shared bank account, a lease, furniture we'd picked out together. And part of me still loved him, even though I hated what he'd done. It felt like a betrayal of my own heart to admit that our relationship was broken beyond repair. Chloe, ever the practical one, sat me down and helped me make a list. "Okay," she said, tapping a pen against her notebook. "If you're serious about leaving, you need a plan. First, where are you going to live?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I can't stay here forever." "Well, you're welcome to stay as long as you need," she said. "But eventually, you'll need your own space. Do you have any savings?" "Some," I said. "But most of it's tied up in our joint account." "Then step one is to open a new account," she said firmly. "Transfer whatever's yours before Mark can touch it. You don't want to be left with nothing if things get messy." She was right, of course, but the thought of taking those steps, of making this real, was terrifying. Still, I knew I couldn't stay stuck in limbo forever. Later that day, I sat down with my laptop and started looking up divorce lawyers. Just typing the word divorce into the search bar made my chest tighten. This wasn't what I'd wanted for my life. I'd married Mark because I thought he was the one, because I believed we could build a future together. Now, that future felt like a cruel joke. I found a few local lawyers and sent out some inquiries, explaining my situation as best I could without breaking down. One of them called me back almost immediately, and we set up a consultation for the next day. That night, I lay awake in Chloe's guest room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything I'd lost. My trust in Mark, my sense of security, even my hair. It all felt like it had been ripped away from me in an instant. But beneath the sadness, there was a growing sense of determination. I deserved better than this. Better than Mark's spinelessness. Better than Linda's manipulation. Better than a life where I constantly had to prove my worth to people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The consultation with the lawyer was a turning point. She listened patiently as I explained what had happened, taking notes and asking questions when necessary. When I was finished, she looked at me and said, "You have every right to be angry. What your mother-in-law did wasn't just invasive, it was criminal. And your husband's complicity makes it even worse." Hearing someone else validate my feelings was a relief I hadn't realized I needed. The lawyer explained my options. I could file for divorce, press charges against Linda, or both. She assured me that I didn't have to decide everything right away, but I needed to start protecting myself, financially, legally, and emotionally. By the time I left her office, I felt more in control than I had in weeks. For the first time, I had a plan. A way to take back some of the power that Linda and Mark had stolen from me. Over the next few days, I started putting the plan into action. I opened a new bank account and transferred my portion of our savings. I changed the passwords on all my accounts and made sure Linda didn't have access to any of my personal information. I also blocked Linda's number. I didn't need to hear any more of her rants or guilt trips. As far as I was concerned, she was out of my life for good. Mark, however, was harder to cut off. He kept texting and calling, begging me to come home. One night, he even showed up at Chloe's door looking like a wreck. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Just come back." But I couldn't, not after everything that had happened. "I don't think there's anything left to fix," I told him, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. He left after that, and I haven't heard from him since. Breaking point reached, I knew this was the end of my marriage. It hurt like hell, but it also felt like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't living under Linda's shadow, or bending over backward to make Mark happy. This was the start of something new, something better. After the confrontation with Linda and my decision to leave Mark, I knew I couldn't just walk away without holding them accountable. The haircut was a symbol of something far deeper, the utter disregard for my boundaries, my trust, and my dignity. It wasn't just Linda's crime, it was Mark's complicity that hurt the most. I realized I needed to take action, not just for myself, but to ensure neither of them would ever think this behavior was acceptable again. Pressing charges against Linda seemed like the obvious next step, but the idea of involving the police made me uneasy. What if it just makes everything messier? I asked Chloe as we sat at her kitchen table, a pile of papers spread out in front of us. Chloe shook her head. Messier than what? She broke into your house and assaulted you in your sleep. That's not something you just let slide. If you don't do something, she'll think she can get away with it, and who knows what she'll try next. She had a point. Linda had already shown she wasn't afraid to cross boundaries. If I let this go, what would stop her from coming after me again? The next morning, I gathered everything I had as evidence. I took photos of my hair, the hacked-up mess she'd left me with, and the texts and voicemails she'd sent me afterward. I wrote out a detailed timeline of events, starting with the lunch I'd had with Matt that had apparently sparked her delusional accusations. I also decided to press record every time Linda called. Even though I'd blocked her on my phone, she'd found other ways to contact me, including calling from unknown numbers. One of the messages she left was particularly chilling. You can run all you want, but you'll always be my son's wife. You owe it to him to come back and fix this. Owe it to him? The only thing I owed anyone was justice. For myself. With everything documented, I made an appointment with a police officer who handled domestic disputes. Walking into the station was nerve-wracking. I felt like I was about to be judged for bringing something as trivial as a haircut to the authorities. But the officer I spoke with was professional and kind. As I explained what had happened, he didn't laugh or dismiss me. Instead, he nodded, taking detailed notes. When I finished, the officer leaned forward and said, "You're absolutely right to report this. What your mother-in-law did is considered assault, and the fact that she entered your home without permission makes it even more serious. We'll file a report and take it from there." For so long, I'd felt like I was overreacting or being dramatic, but now I had someone on my side who understood the gravity of what had happened. After filing the police report, I turned my attention back to Mark. I'd already told him our marriage was over, but now I needed to make it official. I called my lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. The lawyer was incredibly supportive, walking me through each step and explaining what to expect. "Given the circumstances," she said, "I think you have a strong case for a restraining order against your mother-in-law. And as for your husband, we'll make sure the division of assets is fair. Do you think he'll contest the divorce?" I thought about it for a moment. Mark wasn't a bad person at his core, but he was weak, and he'd always let Linda call the shots. I couldn't imagine him putting up much of a fight. "I don't think so," I said. "He'll probably just go along with whatever Linda tells him to do." The lawyer nodded. "We'll be prepared either way." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, therapy sessions, and long conversations with Chloe. I also began looking for a new place to live. Staying with Chloe had been a lifesaver, but I didn't want to overstay my welcome. Plus, I knew I needed a space of my own. A fresh start where I could heal and rebuild without the constant reminders of what had happened. Throughout this time, Linda continued to loom in the background like a dark cloud. She hadn't been arrested yet, but the police assured me that they were investigating my case and that charges would likely be filed soon. Knowing that she might finally face consequences gave me a sense of closure. Sure enough, a week later, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. And of course, it was Linda. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" she hissed. "Running to the police, tearing apart your marriage, ruining my son's life. You're nothing but a coward." I hung up without saying a word. After that, I changed my phone number and gave the new one only to a handful of trusted friends and family members. I also let the police know about the call, adding it to the growing list of evidence against Linda. By the time Linda was officially charged with assault and breaking and entering, I felt a sense of justice I hadn't thought possible. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it sent a clear message. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else walk all over me ever again. As for Mark, he eventually reached out through my lawyer, asking for one final conversation. I declined. There was nothing left to say. I wasn't the same person I'd been when I married him, and honestly, that was a good thing. One of the first things I did after moving into my new apartment was cut off all remaining ties to Linda and Mark. Legally, things were still in progress. The divorce paperwork was being finalized, and Linda's charges were moving through the system. But emotionally, I was ready to let them go. I blocked Mark on every platform, even though he hadn't reached out since our last communication through the lawyer. Part of me wondered if he'd given up, or if Linda was still pulling his strings behind the scenes. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Now, Linda's facing legal charges, and Mark? He's exactly where he wants to be, wrapped in her apron strings. It's a weird kind of freedom to let go of people who never really had your back. I might not have my long hair anymore, but at least I've got my dignity, and that's something Linda or Mark could never take from me.